Althea Horner's quotes and psychological insights. 1. A child whose mother cannot tolerate his aggression cannot tolerate his own aggression. This means that if a mother can't handle her child's anger or aggression, the child will also struggle to accept and deal with those feelings. Horner emphasized that the mother plays a key role in helping the child learn to manage these emotions in a healthy way. In simpler terms, Horner believed that if a mother can't handle her child's angry feelings, the child won't learn how to cope with their own anger either. 2. The child develops defenses not against the outside world, but against his own inner impulses. This means that children create defense mechanisms to protect themselves from their own emotions and impulses, like anger or desire, when they feel those feelings are unacceptable or dangerous. Horner focused on how children manage these internal conflicts. In simpler terms, Horner believed that kids build ways to protect themselves from their own feelings, rather than from the outside world, when they think their emotions are wrong or scary. 3. In order to grow, the child must internalize the mother's supportive presence, not her controlling intrusion. This means that for a child to develop in a healthy way, they need to take in the mother's support but not feel controlled by her. Horner believed that if the mother is too controlling, it prevents the child from becoming independent and forming a strong sense of self. In simpler terms, Horner thought that children grow best when they feel supported, not controlled, by their mothers, so they can become confident and independent. 4. When love is conditional, the child learns to be whatever is required to avoid abandonment. This means that when a child feels that love depends on meeting certain conditions, they will change who they are to avoid being abandoned. Horner believed that children in these situations often develop a false self, pretending to be what others want so they can feel accepted. In simpler terms, Horner thought that if kids feel like they're only loved when they act a certain way, they will hide their true selves to avoid being left alone. 5. The capacity to be alone without feeling abandoned is a developmental achievement. This means that being able to feel okay when you're alone, without feeling abandoned, is a sign of healthy emotional growth. Horner believed that developing a strong sense of self allows people to feel secure even when they're not with others. In simpler terms, Horner thought that being comfortable with being alone and not feeling abandoned shows that a person has grown emotionally in a healthy way. 7. Emotional development is a process of moving from dependence on external approval to internal self-approval. This means that as people grow emotionally, they learn to rely less on others for validation and instead develop a strong sense of self-worth from within. Horner believed that true psychological growth happens when you can approve of yourself without needing approval from others. In simpler terms, Horner thought that as we grow, we need to learn to feel good about ourselves without always needing others to tell us we're doing well. 8. A person who was never nurtured cannot trust nurturing and cannot provide it. This means that people who didn't receive enough care and emotional support as children may struggle to trust or give nurturing in relationships as adults. Horner believed this lack of early nurturing can lead to difficulties in forming healthy relationships later on. In simpler terms, Horner thought that if someone wasn't properly cared for growing up, they might have trouble trusting or offering care in their adult relationships. 9. When the child's basic emotional needs are unmet, the result is a fragmented sense of self. This means that when a child's emotional needs aren't properly met, their sense of self becomes fragmented or broken. Horner believed that disruptions in early attachments can lead to personality disorders, where the person struggles to feel whole and cohesive. In simpler terms, Horner thought that if a child doesn't get the emotional care they need, it can lead to a feeling of being disconnected or unstable as a person later in life. 10. The individual defends against the pain of abandonment by denying emotional dependence on others. This means that people who have felt abandoned or neglected often try to protect themselves by acting like they don't need emotional support from others. Horner believed that this is a defense strategy to avoid being hurt again. In simpler terms, Horner thought that when people are afraid of being abandoned, they sometimes pretend they don't need anyone to protect themselves from feeling more pain. Psychological insights. 1. Object relations theory. Horner's work is based on object relations theory, which looks at how early relationships, especially with caregivers, shape the development of the self. She focused on how these relationships are internalized and how they affect the way we interact with others later in life. In simpler terms, Horner believed that the relationships we have as children, especially with our caregivers, deeply influence how we see ourselves and how we handle relationships as adults. 3. False self. Horner explained that the false self is a way people protect themselves when they grow up with conditional love or emotionally unavailable caregivers. The false self hides their true feelings and desires to gain approval or avoid rejection. This can make relationships feel less authentic and leave the person feeling empty inside. In simpler terms, Horner thought that people sometimes create a false version of themselves to please others, especially if they didn't get enough love or support growing up, which can lead to feeling unfulfilled in life. 5. Defensive strategies. Horner described different defense mechanisms people use to protect themselves from emotional pain, especially when early relationships didn't provide the care they needed. These defenses include denial, refusing to accept reality, projection, blaming others for their own feelings, and withdrawal, pulling away from relationships. These defenses help people avoid facing painful feelings of abandonment or rejection. In simpler terms, Horner thought that when people didn't get the love and support they needed growing up, they used defenses like denial, blaming others, or pulling away to protect themselves from getting hurt again. 6. The development of the self. Horner believed that a strong, healthy sense of self depends on a child's relationship with their primary caregivers. If caregivers are inconsistent, too controlling, or emotionally unavailable, the child may develop a fragmented sense of self, leading to problems with self-esteem, identity, and relationships. In simpler terms, Horner thought that when kids don't get consistent love and support from their caregivers, it can make them struggle with feeling confident and secure in themselves and in their relationships as they grow up. 7. The importance of early nurturing. Horner stressed how important nurturing is in a child's early development. A child who gets enough emotional support can develop trust in others and a strong sense of self. But if a child is neglected or abandoned, they may struggle with trust, controlling their emotions, and self-worth throughout their life. In simpler terms, Horner believed that when children get enough care and love early on, they grow up feeling more secure and trusting. Without this, they may have trouble with trust and confidence later in life. 8. Abandonment and attachment. Horner emphasized how early abandonment and broken attachment can have a serious impact on a child. Children who experience neglect or emotional unavailability from caregivers often develop a strong fear of abandonment, which makes it hard for them to form secure and healthy relationships as adults. In simpler terms, Horner thought that when kids feel abandoned or unloved by their caregivers, it can cause them to be afraid of being left again, making it difficult to have trusting relationships when they grow up. 9. Emotional regulation. Horner believed that children learn how to manage their emotions through their early interactions with caregivers. When caregivers acknowledge and help the child handle their feelings, the child learns to regulate emotions. But if caregivers ignore or can't handle the child's emotions, the child may struggle with managing their feelings, leading to problems like emotional outbursts or detachment. In simpler terms, Horner thought that kids learn how to control their emotions by watching how their caregivers respond to them. If caregivers don't help, the child may have trouble managing their feelings as they grow up. 10. Therapeutic goals. Horner's therapy aimed to help people build a more cohesive sense of self by addressing early attachment failures and emotional wounds. In therapy, individuals can explore their unmet emotional needs, bring together the fragmented parts of their personality, and develop healthier ways to relate to themselves and others. In simpler terms, Horner's therapy helps people heal from early emotional pain, become more whole, and learn better ways to connect with themselves and others. Althea Horner's work focused on the importance of early emotional experiences and relationships in shaping the development of the self.